This new year, we're celebrating at your sister's place. There's no room for you or your kids, my mom said in the family group chat. Then my sister messaged, but leave the kids with a nanny and come cook dinner, as always. And my dad just added, and don't make us feel bad. We still want our gifts. I didn't make a scene. My name is Leo. I'm 33, a chef, and the oldest kid in a family that treats food like religion and me like the unpaid priest. I run a small neighborhood kitchen inside a market hall. I wake up at 5 a.m., chop onions until the room blurs, and I still come home with my forearms smelling like garlic. I have two kids. Maya is 7 and likes to count the bubbles in pancake batter, and Eli is 5 and steals cherry tomatoes like he's pulling off a heist. Their mom and I split when Eli was 2. It's just us most days. I pack school lunches in deli containers with masking tape labels that say silly things like, Maya, do not trade for a shriveled carrot. In my family, I'm the reliable one, which looks sweet in group photos and feels like being the coat rack in real life. If something needs doing, it lands in my hands. If someone forgets an errand, it becomes my emergency. If there's a party, I'm the chef, dishwasher, planner, and person who gets thanked in a sentence that ends with, of course we can't pay you, we're family. My sister, Val, is the golden one. She's 29, an interior designer with an Instagram that looks like a catalog. My mom calls her our star, which is funny because stars are just balls of gas millions of miles away. And that's exactly how Val acts, beautiful and distant, with gravity that pulls everyone else out of orbit. I wasn't always the coat rack. When we were little, I was just the quieter kid who liked stirring pots and reading recipes like they were maps. My dad loved to say, real men grill, Leo, then laugh when I corrected his grill temp and his steaks came out gray. I learned early that in our house praise was a precious mineral and it had Val's face on the label. Your sister always had taste, Mom would say, running her hand along a table runner like it was silk on a runway. Leo, don't overthink that sauce. I'm not, I'd say, and then overthink it anyway. Being a chef made sense to me. Food is honest. It tastes like what you do to it. It doesn't smile at you and then keep score in a private spreadsheet. When I got my first line cook job, nobody cared if I was sensitive. They cared if my risotto held together. I liked that. I liked the burn on my wrist where the salamander kissed me. It felt like proof. I still tried to be the good son. I showed up. I fixed Mom's clogged sink with a coat hanger. I took Dad to his cardiology appointment and snuck him a decent latte after. I hung 3 frames Val couldn't be bothered to level. I cooked for birthdays and just because nights, which in our family meant because Val invited for extra people and Mom panicked. Leo, could you whip up something light? Mom would say, already opening my tote because she knew I brought knives. I didn't plan to cook tonight. I'd say, you're so talented, honey. And that was that. I'd end up sweating in their kitchen while Val took selfies in the good light. The micro scene that still stings happened last fall, after I brought Maya and Eli to Sunday dinner. I'd made a big pot of chicken soup because the kids had sniffles. We ate, and for a second it felt normal. Warm bowls, spoons clinking, Eli fishing for the biggest carrot like he was deep-sea trawling. Then Mom looked at me and said, Leo, maybe next time make something, I don't know, more sophisticated? Your sister's friends are used to elevated flavors. I set my spoon down. It's chicken soup for sick kids. Val laughed softly. Don't be defensive. You know we love your food. Dad added, you should practice more plating. People eat with their eyes. Maya whispered, I like Daddy's soup, and reached for my hand under the table. I smiled at her and kept my voice level. Noted. That night, after I bathed the kids and folded tiny socks into tiny fists, I wiped down our kitchen counter and stood there with the sponge in my hand. Tasting that line again, more sophisticated, like a pit in fruit. I didn't know it yet, but that was the first scrape of the match. The second would be a message. But not yet. First, there were years of small asks, small digs, and the kind of math families do when they pretend debts aren't debts because they were typed with a heart emoji. It started in my 20s. I was the first to move out, the first to work nights, the first to realize being there for family was code for Leo will cover it. Can you front us $250 for the party trays? Mom texted one December when I was a line cook making $14.25 an hour. I'll pay you back Friday. Friday came and went. I didn't see the money. The next Friday, Dad asked if I could bring a brisket for the vibe. I did the math in my head. $1.68 for the meat, $12 for spices, 6 hours of oven time I couldn't bill anyone for. We'll settle up after, he said. It's family. After never came. Instead, Mom posted a photo of Val holding a mason jar cocktail and captioned it so blessed. When my kids were born, the asks changed shape but not weight. You're so lucky, Mom would say when I showed up with Maya in a sling and 2 trays of lasagna. Cooking comes naturally to you. Luck had nothing to do with it. Lasagna is hours of prep and a sink that looks like a crime scene. But nobody wants to hear a chef complain about cooking. It's like asking a lifeguard why they're wet. Val's asks were always framed as opportunities for me. Babe, I'm hosting a reveal, she'd call, nails clicking on her phone. Can you do past bites? Something wow, but not expensive. Also, no garlic. Or onions. Or dairy. And like, no carbs. That's air, I'd say. She'd laugh. You're hilarious. 7 p.m. The worst was the New Year's 4 years ago. I'd been saving for a new convection oven for my stall. I had exactly $2,130 toward a $2,800 price tag. Mom asked if I could help with a few things for New Year's Eve. A few things turned into a menu that would make a caterer sweat. 6 appetizers, 3 mains, 2 desserts. Who's paying for ingredients? I asked, trying to keep it neutral. We'll reimburse, Mom said. You know how it is. We're tapped after the holidays. I put $412.79 on my card and kept the receipt folded in my wallet like an IOU you carry close to your pulse. On New Year's Day, I texted a photo of the receipt. Mom heart reacted and wrote, "Let's settle after Dad's bonus." The bonus bought Val a weekend in Palm Springs. The IOU bought me a lesson. It wasn't just money. It was time. Time I could have spent sleeping so I didn't nod off on the train. Time I could have spent with my kids, who counted the number of times I said one SEC like it was a game. The little humiliations layered like Philo. Leo, can you move your car? Val would say, at her own party, while I was plating. Our guests have nicer vehicles. Leo, don't use the good knives, Dad would say, while I was slicing meat thin enough to see through. They're for show. One July, I said I couldn't make it to a barbecue because I had tickets to take Maya to the aquarium. Mom texted back, family comes first. I stared at that message for a long time, then stared at my daughter's little blue jellyfish backpack and chose the aquarium. That got me 3 days of cold silence followed by, "We forgive you. Next time, let us know sooner so we can plan the menu." Plan the menu meant plan me. There were loans that weren't loans. $200 for a temporary shortfall. $150 until Friday. $80 because Val's client hasn't paid. I kept a note on my phone with dates and amounts like I was managing petty cash at a job I didn't apply for. Over 3 years, the total hit $3,742. I never said the number out loud because saying it would make it real, and real would make me angry, and angry would make me the problem. When I did try to talk, it turned slippery. Mom, about the receipts. We're good for it, she'd say, as if character was currency. Dad, I can't do the next party. I'm behind at the shop. You'll figure it out. You always do. Val, I need a budget if you want those bites. I'll tag you in my post, she'd say. Exposure, babe. The day I realized I was being used wasn't a dramatic epiphany. It was a Tuesday night in my apartment. The kids were at their mom's. I was alone at the table with bills, invoices, and a Tupperware of cold roast chicken. I opened my notes app to tally the running family tab, and, for once, I didn't round down. I added the gas money I didn't need. I added the babysitter I booked so I could cook at Val's. I added the cake stand I replaced after Mom's friend knocked it off the counter and laughed. The number hit $4,186. I exhaled slow. In the quiet, I could hear the building's radiator tick like a metronome. I could also hear my own voice saying the same sentence I say to my line cooks when a ticket comes in wrong. We own our choices. I closed the Notes app and opened a fresh one. I titled it, Boundaries. I will not subsidize family events. I will not cook for free. My kids come first. Always. No is a full sentence. I wish I could say I sent that list right away, but families are sticky. The next day, Mom called. We're thinking of doing a little something for Thanksgiving. Can you manage the turkey and a few sides? How many guests? I asked. Just a few, she said, which meant 30. What's the budget? Silence. Then, don't be crass. Budgets are not crass, I said. They're adult. She sighed like I'd disappointed her by growing a spine. We'll talk later. Later turned into the group chat that would yank everything into the open. The words were cold and neat, like a fridge note on the last slice of cake. And the math in those words was simple. They wanted more. They always did. But the next part isn't about a text. It's about the night the request turned into a demand, and I finally held up the bill. New Year's Eve. My sister's new place. She called it a loft, But it was a two-bedroom apartment with high ceilings and a wall of plants named things like Jasper and Queenie. The plan, per mom, was festive but intimate. In our family, intimate means invite everyone we've ever met. At noon, my phone buzzed with the group chat. The words landed like ice. This new year we're celebrating at your sister's place. There's no room for you or your kids, Mom wrote. A minute later Val added, but leave the kids with a nanny and come cook dinner, as always. Dad chimed in. And don't make us feel bad, we still want our gifts. I stared at the screen. My throat felt dry, the way it gets when you take bread out too early and it's pale and you know it should go back in, but someone is hungry and you're tired. I didn't reply. Not yet. Instead, I packed Maya and Eli's overnight bag because they were spending the evening with their mom. I packed a tiny fake New Year's kit, 2 paper horns, hats, a clock I drew on a paper plate, and we did our countdown at 5 p.m. in my living room. 10, 9, 8. Maya yelled like the neighbors had to hear it. I kissed their heads, handed them to their mom at the door, and drove to Val's because some habits die loud. The elevator door opened to laughter and clinking glasses. I could smell perfume, citrus, and the unmistakable heat of an oven someone doesn't know how to use. Leo, Val said, air kissing near my cheek. You made it. The kitchen's a disaster. I'm here as a guest, I said calm. She laughed, flicked her hair. You're funny. Mom's in the living room. I walked in. Mom looked at me like I was a late delivery. Dad was already in a chair, scrolling his phone. Code in the guest room, Mom said. Can you start on the canapes? The oven's too hot. Or too cold. Something's wrong. I'm not cooking, I said. Same tone I used to tell a vendor they shorted me 20 pounds of wings. She blinked. What? I'm here for an hour. Then I'm heading home. I RSVP'd, no to catering. Dad looked up. Don't start. I pulled a folder from my tote and set it on the counter. Inside was an invoice, printed in black and white. Simple. New Year's catering, menu attached. Labor, 8 hours at $45 per hour. Ingredients estimate, $350 to $500. Total, $710 to $860. Terms, 50% deposit to book. Net 7. Val snorted. Is this a joke? No, I said. It's a boundary. Leo, Mom whispered. Voice tight. Don't embarrass us. A cousin walked by with a drink and did a double take like he'd stumbled into a courtroom. I kept my voice level. You told me there wasn't room for my kids, but there was room for my labor. That's not how my life works. Stop being dramatic, Dad said. It's one night. It's not one night, I said, meeting his eyes. It's years. It's $4,186 in ES. It's being told to leave my kids with a nanny so I can saute for free. It's being told not to make you feel bad while you ask me for gifts. Val folded her arms. You always make things about money. No, I said. You do. You make things about my money, my time, my work. I'm making things about respect. Mom's voice went soft and sharp at once. We are family. Exactly, I said. Which is why I'm saying this calmly. I'm not cooking. If you want a caterer, here's my rate sheet. If you want your son, I'm here as a guest for 1 hour. The room quieted in that heavy way rooms do when the music cuts off and everyone realizes the song was covering the tension. Aunt Lila edged over like a diplomat. Honey, can't you help just a little? No, I said. Not like this. Mom's eyes flashed. After everything we've done for you. I held up a hand. This isn't about revenge. This is about closure. Dad scoffed. Closure? On what? On me being the coat rack, I said. On you weaponizing, we're family, to get professional labor for free. On being told there's no room for my kids, but there's room for my hands. Val took a step closer, voice dropping. You're ruining my night. I looked at the island covered in half-prepped ingredients. Your night was built on a person you don't respect. For a second, I thought Dad would yell. Instead, he leaned back and said, if you walk out, don't come back. I nodded. That's a boundary, too. Mom's jaw clenched. At least don't make a scene. I'm being very quiet, I said, and I was. My heart wasn't even racing. It felt like plating a dish I'd practiced 100 times. I took my coat from the guest room, walked back through the living room, and put the invoice on the counter like a truce flag with numbers on it. As I reached the door, Mom said, we still expect our gifts. I turned. You're getting one. It's called me not lying to myself anymore. Then I left. The elevator doors closed. In the polished steel, I saw my face. Tired, yes, but steady. At midnight, while strangers cheered, I sat on my couch with a bowl of reheated soup and texted Happy New Year To two small people who are the only ones entitled to my free labor forever. The first day of the year came with 23 missed calls. By noon, the count hit 41. 3 voicemails from Mom that went from frosty to teary to weaponized nostalgia. 2 from Dad, call me back and grow up. 7 texts from Val. A photo of a collapsed tart, a video of sparkler fountains, a paragraph about how my energy ruined her vibe, and 1 line that said, "You should apologize to Mom." I put my phone face down and made pancakes with the kids when they came back that afternoon. "Happy New Year, redo," I said, and we ate them in a fort. On January 2nd, my Aunt Lila sent a long message that started with, "I love you," and ended with, "Just help them this once." I typed and deleted 4 replies before sending. I won't be discussing this via group text. If Mom and Dad want to talk respectfully about the future, I'll answer. No more arguments about the past. I expected quiet after that. What I got was escalation dressed as concern. "Mom, we're worried about you." Me, "I'm fine." "Mom, you've always been sensitive. This isn't healthy." Me, "My boundary is healthy." "Dad, your mother didn't sleep." Me, "That's unfortunate." "Dad, we're disappointed." Me, "I know." Val posted a carousel on Instagram. Grateful for a beautiful new year with family. In slide 3, you could see the raw tart I didn't bake. In slide 5, a picture of Mom's eyes looking too bright. The caption ended with, "Some people care about themselves more than others." I didn't engage. I turned off notifications and went to work. At the stall, the market felt normal. The same woman ordered the same roast chicken sandwich and said it tasted like Sunday at Grandma's. A teenager told me he wanted to cook for a living and asked which knives to buy. I said, "Whichever you'll sharpen." It was almost enough to forget the buzzing rectangle in my pocket. On January 4th, I got a spreadsheet. I'm not kidding. Val emailed a Google Sheet titled Leon Contributions. It listed family events with columns for food cost, market rate, and credit for exposure. The final row subtracted imaginary Instagram value from actual labor and concluded I owed them gratitude. I stared at it. I closed it. I wrote back 1 sentence. "Please send any invoices for services you believe you provided. I will do the same." Then I did. I sent a single clean invoice for $4,186 labeled Historical Reimbursements and Labor Credits. Terms, net 30. A note at the bottom read, "Going forward, my availability is limited. Bookings require deposit. My kids are not optional." It sounds cold. It wasn't. It was the least emotional thing I'd done with them in years. Mom called within minutes. "Is this a joke?" "No," I said. "You're charging your family. I'm collecting what you promised." That's not how love works. Love doesn't ask me to hide my children or work for free. You're punishing us. This isn't about revenge. This is about closure. I repeated, because people forget new language the first time they hear it. She switched tactics. "We'll talk when you calm down." "I'm calm right now." She hung up. The next week was a parade of accidental run-ins. Dad dropped by my stall because he was nearby, then stood in front of my line and said, "So you're really doing this?" In a voice loud enough for customers to hear. I smiled and said, "What can I get started for you?" He left without ordering. Val left a bag at my door stuffed with returned gifts I'd given her kids, puzzles, books, a sweater with tiny rockets. There was a note. "Until you apologize." I packed the things, drove to a shelter that takes children's items, and donated them under my kids' names. On the receipt, I wrote, "From Maya and Eli." Happy reading. The market manager pulled me aside one morning. "Everything okay, Leo? Your dad came by." He seemed intense. "I'm handling it," I said. At home, the quiet felt different. Not empty, just wide. I started doing things I hadn't had time for. I went to a parent-teacher meeting and actually sat, not hovering by the door like I needed to sprint to someone else's kitchen. I taught Maya how to crack an egg with one hand. It took 10 tries and half a dozen shells, and then she nailed it and shouted like she'd scored a goal. Eli put on my apron and said, "Chef Eli reporting for duty," and I almost cried into a bowl of potatoes. I started running on the river path 3 times a week, slow but steady, and I stopped drinking coffee at 10 p.m. just because I was on autopilot. The calls kept coming, but less often. The tones softened from anger to manipulation to the one they thought would hook me. Nostalgia. "Mom, remember when you used to make cinnamon toast for Val after school?" Me, "Yes." "Mom, you were always such a good brother." Me, "I still am. I'm just not a doormat." Silence. Then came the money play. Dad texted, "Your invoice is unreasonable. We've done things for you too." "What things?" I asked. rides, support, family. I sent a revised invoice with line items and screenshots where mom had literally typed, "We'll reimburse." I added a second page, credits given, to make it fair. Gas money I didn't charge, hours I rounded down. 2 cakes I wrote off because they were for grandma, and I loved her more than fairness. The new total was $3,930. I hit send. On day 29, mom texted, "Can we have more time?" "Yes," I replied. Net 60. She sent a heart. Then, "Please bring a salad to Aunt Lila's birthday Saturday. It would mean a lot." "No," I wrote, "but I'll come for an hour with the kids." "It's a seated dinner," she shot back. "No kids." "Then it's a no." She didn't reply. I went anyway, because Aunt Lila has always been kind. I brought flowers. I brought my kids. We stayed an hour. When mom tried to tug me toward the kitchen with a stack of plates, I said, "I'm not working tonight," and returned to coloring dinosaurs with Eli. Driving home, Maya asked, "Are we in trouble?" "No, baby," I said. "We're doing something new." It feels weird at first. On day 45, Val emailed a link to a catering company with the subject, "Since you're busy." I replied, "Great choice. Their rates are fair. Book early." On day 60, a check arrived in the mail. It wasn't for the full amount. It was for $1,500 with a sticky note that said, "Good faith." I took a photo of it next to the invoice and replied, "Received $1,500. Remaining balance, $2,430. Net 30. I felt ridiculous and alive at the same time. Then something shifted I didn't expect. Mom sent a text without emojis. "I miss the kids. Can we see them Saturday? No cooking. Just visit." 2 hours, I wrote. "Our place. We'll order pizza. You can bring a board game." They came. It was awkward for 15 minutes, and then Eli made Dad laugh with a joke about broccoli that wasn't funny, but he sold it like a pro. Mom brought a board game and only corrected Maya's rules twice. When they left, Mom hugged me stiffly and said, "You're stubborn." And I said, "I learned from you." And we both managed a smile that wasn't sharp. The rest of the money arrived a week later. A cashier's check. No note. Just numbers. I deposited it and closed the Notes app with the tally. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt balanced. The next invite was for a spring brunch. The message read, "We'd like to host a small thing. You're welcome with the kids. No work required. If you want to bring something, bring yourself." I didn't trust it, but I went. I brought store-bought muffins because pettiness can be delicious in 12-count assorted. Val stood by the window with a Bloody Mary and said, "You've changed." "Not really," I said. "I just stopped paying for the same lesson." She rolled her eyes. "You think you're better than us." "I think I'm better to myself." She didn't like that, but she didn't hand me a cutting board either. That night, after I tucked the kids in, I sat at the table where I write menus and bills and grocery lists. I wrote a different kind of list. Routine. School drop-off without speed walking. Run 2 miles, stretch, hydrate. Inventory on Tuesdays, not at midnight. Sundays, pancakes, fort, nap. Boundaries, keep them boring. And because I'm a chef and can't help it, I added, teach Maya bechamel. Teach Eli that chocolate chips go in last. The phone still buzzes sometimes. I still say no. Not angry, just steady. And the calls have slowly turned into normal questions, like, "What time is the recital? And do you want the kids Saturday?" That's not magic. That's a new recipe I'm stubbornly measuring every time. Some nights I think about the heat in my sister's tiny oven and the way Mom's voice went thin when I said no. It doesn't thrill me. It settles me. People say kitchens are about fire. They're also about timing. This was just mine. Life didn't flip. It just clicked. My name is Leo. I'm 33. A chef. A dad. I learned to charge for my time. To say no without guilt. To let silence stand when truth lands. For $1,186 isn't a wound anymore. It's a line I don't cross. Val still posts perfection. Mom still says be nice. Dad still grills. But now they ask, what works for you? And sometimes my answer is nothing. My kids learned that no doesn't mean you stop loving people. Eli once said, boundaries are like oven mitts. And I thought, he gets it. So here's the recipe. Write the bill. Set the timer. Serve only what's yours. If they say there's no room for you or your kids, make your own table. Then sit down and eat.